Hello and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. This is In the Roud, a folk song podcast, and I am your host, Matt Quinn. Join me as we travel through the world of traditional folk song, one song per episode, in the order they appear in the Roud Index. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. This podcast is proud to be partly sponsored by the Traditional Song Forum. Meeting regularly both in person and online, the TSF provides a place for a variety of topics related to folk song, song collectors, singers, and many other aspects of folk song research to be presented and discussed. It's free to join, and most meetings are free to attend. So discover more about the TSF at www.tradsong.org. That's www.tradsong.org. So let's get going. This week's song is Roud number 58, which is Child Ballad number 90, a song called Jellon Grame. Another interesting title there. Last week, False Foodridge. This time, Jellon Grame. What will they think of next? I'll give you a hint. Next week's song has the name Mary in it. Anyway, later on in this episode, we'll hear from our singer guest, Nick Caffrey. But for now, let's have a look at the song's history with the creator of the Roud Index himself, Steve Roud. Well, hello and welcome back again, Steve Roud. Hello.
Hello there, Matt.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Yes, fine.
Good. Nice to see you. Last time I saw you, I think I was in your house, pilfering your shelves for
Yes,
things,
that's right.
and you accepting very generous donations to the Quinn archive. So, very nice of you. Lovely to see you again. We're back with a not particularly known child ballad. I mean, there's lots of them because lots of them haven't been pilfered as much as some. Like last week with False Foodridge, not many. And same here, Jellon Grame. Not a song I'd heard of at all.
I must point out to your listeners that you come to me when there's nobody else who can talk about it.
Well, it's between you and Helen Lindley. Helen Lindley's been on the podcast a few times. She is someone who does new settings of child ballads that literally no one has sung. So if it's a child ballad that on the revival literally no one has sung, then she does both the history and the sing-off. But because some people have sung it, even if it's only one or two people, that's not in Helen's territory, in which case we come to you for the little sung ones. But we will have Helen, I mean, none in this season. We had her once in the last season for Lord Ingram and Child Wyatt, or Cheel Wyatt. But next season in the summer, we're going to have Helen 3 times.
Right.
Because we're coming to 3 songs that literally haven't been sung.
That's right. Nobody knows them.
We've got Brown Robin, which will come up today briefly, I think, and Willie O'Douglas Dale and Tom Potts. These ridiculously unknown child ballads. Anyway, might mention Brown Robin again in a minute, but Jellon Grame, never heard of it. Give us a rundown of the plot and what's it about.
Okay. So this is, I don't know if you said this, Roud 58.
Oh, I didn't. Roud 58, Child Ballad number 90.
Child 90, yes. One of the more obscure ones. Jellon Grame is the name of one of the main characters in one of the versions. Considering we've only got half a dozen, really, traditional versions, we've got an awful lot of names. Jellon Grame and Lily Flower
Oh yes, Jellon Grame is only the title of the first of four versions in
Yeah,
Child.
that's right. So Jellon Graham and Lily Flower are the names of the people, the main characters in the main version that we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
But uh, there is also in the other versions, he's Henry and she is May Marjorie, or he's Hind Henry
oh yeah, we had
and
Hindhorn a few seasons ago, didn't we? As well,
Yeah, that's right. And his girlfriend is Marjorie, and sometimes she's Mary O'Roe, and or sometimes May Young Roe, hyphenated.
right.
And so, as I'll say in a second, considering we've got so few versions, there's quite a lot of variation here in the main plot, as we'll mention. So one of the things to know, which we should have said before, we may have said it, other people may have said it. Child always gives us what's called his A version. He gives letters for all the versions A, B, C, D,
That's right.
and the A one is normal. It's either the oldest or the most complete.
Right. Okay.
It's the one that we tend to regard as the basis.
Sure. Because I
Um,
noticed that almost always in Child, the last one or the latest one, the last one in the list tends to be fragments or
yeah,
at the
that's
very
right.
least incomplete.
It's just fragments, and occasionally you get a fragment as the A version if it's the oldest by far or something like that. But normally, um, so that has a knock-on effect as to how people have regarded this, um, and it's the A version that tends to get reprinted in straight anthologies. The Oxford Book of English Ballads or Scottish Ballads or whatever.
Yes.
Um,
Sure.
so we're going to talk mainly about the A version, which is called Jellon Grame because he's the main character. But as it isn't always the case, the B and the C and the D are a bit different. So you have to read Child to really realize which is which and what's going on.
Okay.
So the story, as in the A version, uh, as I say, Jellon. I don't know what Jellon means, whether it's a adjective or a name, but Jellon Graham. Graham is usually Graham, of course.
Yeah.
It's a Scottish ballad. All the versions except one that we'll talk about in a minute are Scottish.
I've just typed the word Jellon into Google,
Right.
and the only things that are coming up are the song Jellon Grame
Right.
for a child
Okay.
ballad. And there's a well, I mean, there's a western, a film from 2005 called The Proposition, starring John Hurt as a character called Jellon Lamb. So maybe there's a first name thing about Jellon,
Could be. I should have looked up in my dictionary of names.
but there's an American surname called Jellon as well.
Right.
From the sort of 1800s, I think. But nevertheless, most of what comes up on Google, if you type in the word Jellon, is this
Is
child
this
ballad.
song. So not only is it a rare song, but it's a rare name
Indeed.
for
Right,
a
give us the
character.
plot. Give us the plot.
Anyway, back to the plot. Okay, Jellon Graham sends a messenger to his mistress, Lily Flower. She's his mistress, but sometimes she's his wife, telling her to meet him in the forest secretly. Although she is warned by the messenger not to respond to the message, she's warned that she's in danger, and that happens in, I think, all versions. She rides out to see her lover into the woods. Rule number one, do not go into the woods. When the latter, i.e., the lover, Jellon, has already dug her grave and he stabs her to death because he fears he will be killed by her father if he were to find out that she is pregnant by him. And it turns out she is very pregnant by him. She's 8 months pregnant in one of the other versions.
Right.
Um, anyway, so he kills her. But the child survives. The baby survives. We're not quite sure how, but it's all a bit gory. So Jellon brings up his son, allowing him to think that he is the child of Jellon's sister. So he brings up the child, but as his sister's. But one day, when the son asks why he has not been taken to his mother, Jellon Grame admits to murdering her. We don't know why, but he does. And the boy shoots him with his bow and arrow.
Oh,
So the boy avenges his mother's death. The other versions that I've mentioned, the basic plot is the same, that she goes to the wood to meet her lover or her husband, and she is heavily pregnant. But in the other versions, there are actually two men, and sometimes they're brothers, and she's married one, and the other one is jealous. So it's a sort of triangle type thing. But it ends up the same. She goes to the wood to meet one or other, meets the bad brother or the bad lover who kills her. And the baby survives, and the baby avenges his mother's death later on. So in some ways, it's like the standard, what we call the murdered sweetheart ballads. There's lots of those, not so much in Child, but in the tradition, there's lots of songs where a man murders his sweetheart, the newly dug grave and all that.
yeah,
But
or other people kill the man's sweetheart. Things like the Dowie Dens of Yarrow or the
yeah,
in Bruton Town, that sort of
yeah,
thing.
it's a dangerous thing to be a sweetheart in those days.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as, I mean, a lot of the ordinary murdered sweetheart ballads don't actually give a motive, although the woman, is usually pregnant, so that is an underlying motive. But this time it's a little bit more complicated than that, and the versions do have, in the A version, I've forgotten to look at how many, but it has about 20 verses. This isn't a short ballad. You can look at it while I'm talking.
Version A in Child, 22 verses.
22 verses. So
And then version B, 22 verses. Version C, 40 verses.
yeah. So
And
it
then
takes a while.
there's 5 verses of a fragment of
Yeah.
version D. Yeah.
Now, as far as we know, the earliest printed version that we've got is in Scott's Minstrelsy of the Scottish Border, which was published in 1802.
And that's version A in
And
Child, isn't it?
and that's where that's the A in Child, and that's the one, as I say, that gets anthologized to within an inch of its life. I mean, it's often in the anthologies, even though nobody wants to sing it.
Right.
There are several other versions, well, a handful, collected in the 1810s, 1820s, by Scottish collectors. Always, apart from the one version in America, these are always Scottish versions. So we
Right.
know it goes back to 1802 when Scott published it, and Scott is a bit iffy with his editing. You do have to be careful with Scott. But we know it goes back a bit further than that, because he used a version from Anna Brown or Anna Gordon from
Oh,
Falkland.
of Falkland, yeah, right.
Who must have been mentioned before, and she will be mentioned again. So Anna Gordon, or Anna Brown, she was born in 1747, and she got most of her ballads from her mother and her mother's sister, her aunt. She remembers them singing the ballads. Now, we don't know if this one comes from them, but she says that that's when where her ballads came from. So it is conceivable. Let's say I can't find out when her mother was born, but it would have been somewhere around the 1820s. Sorry, 1720s. So the ballad might well go back to, say, the 1740s, 1750s, We know it's in Anna Gordon's repertoire by 1800. So it might be older than that. We don't know. It sounds older than that, the
Yeah,
sort of
certainly.
gruesomeness of it.
That's right. I've just
Um,
got off my shelf my copy of the ballad repertoire of Anna Gordon, Mrs. Brown of Falkland, and yeah, there it is. Jellon Grame and Lilyflower, 22 verses,
yeah.
which is pretty much
So
what Child A is. Yeah,
we could, because we haven't got much to say about Jellon Graham, we'll come back to him in a minute. We might as well talk a little bit more about Anna Gordon, Anna Brown. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of interesting things about Anna Gordon. Her repertoire is interesting. It's a bit earlier than the main Scottish ballad collectors. They were early 19th century, whereas she is late 18th century. Her
yeah.
ballads are often very fine. Child says, no Scottish ballads are superior in kind to those recited in the last century by Mrs. Brown of Falklands in Fifeshire. So, she's held in high regard. But the weird thing, of course, is that she wasn't a peasant. She wasn't one of the, working classes. She wasn't a
Indeed.
farm labourer. She wasn't illiterate. She was highly literate. She was married to a minister, a Scottish, clergyman, and she was the daughter of a professor. So she comes from a solid, literary, middle class family. So occasionally people say, oh, therefore she doesn't count as folk. Or it does mean that these ballads were being sung by the middle classes in the mid 18th century because she gets the songs from her mum and her aunt, who, by all accounts, sang them around the house just for fun. They liked the tunes, they liked the words. In other words, it kind of makes our whole thing about, working class history to these ballads a little bit iffy. But this is only one example. She is one example. You can't build a whole case on this. But anyway, that's the bit about Anna. Well, as you just mentioned, Ruth Perry has a relatively new book, The Ballad World of Anna Gordon, Mrs. Brown.
That's right. We did a Patreon episode where I interviewed Ruth about Anna Gordon for a singer spotlight,
Ah,
and
right, okay.
we talked about Anna Gordon, and we are both holding the previous book in our hands, the ballad repertoire of Anna
Yeah,
Gordon by Sigrid Werwitz.
and that's much less well known because it's
Yeah,
published by the Scottish Text Society.
that's right.
But that's where you get the complete repertoire of Anna Gordon, all the words as we know them from the manuscripts.
That's right. Ruth's book not quite a biography of Anna Gordon, but it's about Anna Gordon and her
Yeah,
literary contribution to these songs and all that sort of thing.
that's right. It is setting the ballads in
Yeah.
the literary
And maybe I've
context
just
of
found
the time.
something, a bit of controversy. Maybe let's see. I've just found the entry on the balladindex.org for Jellon Grame, and there are some notes. I don't know how you feel about this. Where was it? David Fowler, writing the book A Literary History of the Popular Ballad,
Yes.
uh, apparently questions the authority of the whole ballad. He thinks it was all made up by Anna Gordon Brown.
Yeah, possible. Because one of the reasons why he'll say that is that Anna supplied more than one manuscript. There are three, I think, um, to various people, various collectors and various interested people. And this one is not in the earlier manuscripts, it's in the latest, the
Ah,
last one.
because Ruth came on to talk about Lord Bateman and Anna's versions because she had two versions of that. So is that two versions in different manuscripts? Was it? Do you
I
reckon?
I can't remember. It,
Okay,
it,
no,
it
neither
could
can
well
I.
be, or she might have known two versions. It is quite feasible.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
did.
But with this one, it's in one of the later manuscripts.
It's always possible that
Yeah,
people have had their finger in, but
yeah.
it doesn't read like to me that's something that's been made up
No,
at the
it
time.
definitely sounds a bit more like it's been the song's been has had life for a while.
I think so, but we don't know until we find an early version. And as we got no early broadsides, that's another reason why Fowler would be a bit suspicious, is that, if nobody's written it down or printed it before, then that might be a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
The other thing we can say about it, which is interesting, well, I find it interesting. When people talk about child ballads, they are often obsessed with motifs, with, bits of the story
Yeah.
that turn up in different ballads and turn up in folk tales and legends and stuff. And many folklorists spend their whole lives looking at motifs. And us real nerds, we have motif indexes and so on.
Oh, there's a book, isn't there? You mentioned this last time you were on.
Yes, there is a book called Motif Index of the Child Corpus
Yes, which I will not be spending £100
by,
on.
yes, Natasha Versbach, which is
Yeah.
useful but limited. That's the best I can say. Anyway,
Right. Okay.
so you can Child, in fact, mentions a couple of the motifs here. One of them is the messenger inviting somebody into the woods. That does appear, doesn't it appear in False Food Rage, that you're going to talk about soon?
The False Food Rage was last week, and yes, so yeah,
Yeah,
that's already been
yeah.
covered.
So
But it's that.
that's one of the motifs, one of the little themes that turns up quite often. But the one that Child really concentrates on, and there's several pages of international analogues, is the fact that the son, the baby, who later avenges his mother, in some of the versions, he grows up unusually, magically fast.
Oh, that's come up in another ballad, but I can't remember which one. Something we've already covered in the previous 57
Yeah,
episodes.
if you look at Child number 90, that's most of Child's notes are about that motif, because it does come up very often in myths and legends and folk tales.
Yes.
A baby that grows up fast. Now, sometimes that's just because they want a sort of magical thing, but actually, you can see that it's a useful thing for the story. If the baby's going to grow up and eventually kill the father, that's got to be 20 years later that
Yes.
the baby finally cottons on and is big enough to kill his dad. Whereas, and also, and 20 years later, if he gets his comeuppance, that's not really satisfying. But if the baby grows up faster than anyone else, so within, say, 8 or 10 years, he's a grown man, then the baddie gets his comeuppance much quicker, and the revenge is much sweeter. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's mentioned, isn't
There's a reason for it within the logic of the ballad,
Yes.
even though to us it makes no sense. And that's true of a lot of the other versions.
It's in version C in Child, isn't it? You got the line which is the version from Buchan's Ballads of the North of Scotland. He grew as big in 1 year old as some boys would in 3.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the hint that something supernatural is going on.
And then yes, Child says that. That's there, and a faint trace of the same extraordinary thriving in stanza 15 of version B. And when he did grow up a bit, she put him to the lair, and all of the youths was at that school, none could with him compare.
Yeah, that's it. So he is well prepared to do the revengeful deed.
And there are some Scandinavian sort of links as well. There's
links from everywhere. That's what Child loved to do.
But he said there was one of the Scandinavian ballads that is akin to both False Food Rage and remotely to Jellon Grame. The corresponding child grows up in 2 months than other boys in 8 years.
which is pretty quick.
That's pretty quick. I mean,
Yeah,
it's an easy way out of making the child grow up to the adult age, I suppose.
yeah.
And
So,
Child also talks about other links to last week's song, the previous Child ballad, the previous Roud number, False Foodridge, uh, things to do with, especially, yeah, not necessarily the Jellon Grame that's version A in Child, but it says particularly versions B, C, and D, the other three in Jellon
yeah,
Grame.
yeah,
He talks about them related vaguely to the B and C of False Foodridge. I can't remember how many. Oh, there's only three. So the second and third in False Foodridge. There's the woman having two lovers. The one, I'm just quoting Child now. The one who is preferred is killed by the other in False Foodridge, and in Jellon Graham, the woman herself is killed by the lover she has rejected.
yeah,
This kind of interchange is familiar in ballads. In both False Foodridge and Jellon Graham, the son of the woman, before he comes to manhood, takes vengeance on the murderer.
yeah,
So there's clear indications as to why these are next to each other in Child.
yeah. And that's your definition of motif.
Yes.
Is that the same thing keeps turning up over and over again, and we find that us folklorists we find that fascinating. So getting to our numbers, we've talked about the fact that there's actually 5 versions in Child.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
four in the main part, but in the additions and corrections, there's another one.
Oh, I hadn't looked at those
So
yet.
that's 5.
I keep forgetting to check the
That's
edition.
right. Every time I have to remind you.
Yeah.
Uh, but as I've said before, if you buy the Loomis Press edition, they have put the additions in with the main text, so you don't have to ferret around looking for the
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
appendices. Anyway, so 5 versions in Child. There have been a few that Child didn't know about or that have been collected since, but even so, it only adds up to maybe 8 or 9 versions altogether.
That's right.
Or,
There are 26 entries in the index, which probably
yeah,
equates
but
to about eight or nine. Yeah.
most of those are reprints of the Child one.
Exactly. So 8 or 9 is about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're all Scottish except for one, which turns up in Virginia in the 1930s.
That's right. There's 2 entries in the index for USA, and it's 2 printings or collectings of the same version.
Of the same version, collected by Arthur Carl Davis. Now, the Virginia Folklore Society were obsessed with child ballads. They combed the state looking for child ballads. And at the beginning, they ignored everything else, all the other songs.
Right. Okay.
And some collectors secretly collected the other stuff. This is about 1910. And it was only in the 1930s that the society said, oh, whoops, we should have been collecting this other stuff as well. Anyway, so they really did go round with a list of child ballads saying, do you know this one? Do you know that one? But now I had assumed that whoever sung it in Virginia in 1932 would have had a copy of Child on the shelf. But looking at the text, it does look like a traditional version. And it says it was sung by Mr. Yarber. Oh, in North Carolina, actually, 1914. Sung by his father 60 years or more before. So
Yeah,
in
that
other words,
must be available somewhere because I'll come to it later on in the second half of this episode. But Peggy Seeger recorded it in the 1980s, and her version is the one from Mr. Yarber of North Carolina.
yeah, that's
So
right.
that one must be printed somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's printed in more traditional ballads of Virginia by Arthur
Okay,
Carl Davis.
it is there, right? Yeah.
And it's 20 verses. It's a good full version.
Lovely.
Now, Bronson, getting onto the tunes, your
yes.
territory, as you know, Bronson has only one version. The tune collected by Gavin Gregg from Alex Robb, R-O-B-B, Alexander Robb, in 1910, I think, or
1910. That's right. Well, it's in Greg's Rymore Club Misalliance.
Miscellanies.
Miscellanies. There you go. 1910.
Yeah, but it was collected before that, about 1905 probably. But interestingly, for nerds like us,
Mm.
when James Madison Carpenter, came to Scotland in the 30s, he collected a version from Alexander Robb, and I presume it's the same singer.
Ah,
I mean, it might
right.
be his son or it might be his uncle for all I know, but as far as I know, it's the same one. So 25 years later, Carpenter collects it, um, and Carpenter recorded it on a cylinder, the old wax cylinder type thing.
Right.
And that recording still exists. It's on the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library website.
I'll attempt to
You
make a
can,
copy of it
yeah,
and see how unlistenable it is.
it is pretty unlistenable, but you've got to pay for your research, as it were. You've got to get the pain as well as the joy.
That's
Anyway,
right.
that, as far as I know, is the only recording. Now, the Virginia people did do recordings in the 30s. They did do quite a few recordings, but I don't think that one was recorded. I don't think there's an
Right.
audio for it. I think it's only
Okay.
manuscript. So the Carpenter will be the only one that we know.
Yeah.
Um, Carpenter did transcribe it as well. So if you look on the Vaughan Williams site, you'll see the text and the tune written out.
Ah, good.
I'll
Excellent.
send you the references. It's not easy to find.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think that that's pretty much all we can say about Jellon
Jellon Graham,
Grame and Lily Flower.
E. Flower, and or
All the
Marjorie, Henry, etc.
Yes, and
Um,
all the other
but yeah,
people that were
there is
involved.
one tune in Bronson, which I'll just have a brief stab at.
Yeah, so
Uh,
that's the Alex Robb one
that's
from
right.
from the Gregg manuscripts.
That's right. So yeah, Bronson quotes Child in his footnotes, saying Jellon Graham, as well as false food age, has certainly suffered very much in transmission. Um, Mrs. And then Bronson says Mrs. Brown's copy contains less downright doggerel than Motherwell's and Buchan's.
Well, that might, yeah, some people would take that as evidence that she mucked about with it.
Yes,
Who
indeed.
knows?
And he says, yeah, since the ballad was not included in the first batch taken down for William Tyler, is that around 1783?
Right,
It,
yes.
it lacks an air, as in a tune. The only tune that has survived in the record is the following one, noted in our own century. It has something in common with the same singer's melodies for Hind Ettin and Child Waters, two we've covered in the previous seasons. Belongs to the same family of tunes or species, although, as Brian Peters and I discussed last week, we don't quite agree with Bronson sometimes in which families of tunes he puts things in.
Yes.
There was one tune, False Food Rage, where he said it's the same as something else, and I sang it and I thought it's nothing like the thing he thought it was the same as. Anyway, here's the Jellon Graham, Alex Robb. Oh, Jellon Graham sat in good greenwood, and he sharped his broadsword lang. He called on his young foot page, who quickly to him ran. Get up, my young foot page, as far as e'er ye can, for you maun gang to Lily Flower, ere the sun be on the rain. And you must gang to Lily Flower, and I fear you'll never win hame. That second verse has an extra half verse. And so yeah, that's quite I quite like that. It's I, if I say the word basic, I don't mean that in a negative in a sense, but it is quite a sort of basic and relatively sort of ordinary pentatonic child ballad melody in my mind,
Yeah.
which I quite like. I know some people have issue with some of the more sort of ordinary tunes and prefer something a bit more fancy, but I quite like that as a sort of minory modal pentatonic thing.
It sounds. I mean, I've got a cloth ear or tin ear, but it sounds to me like it's only half the tune.
Yeah, da
It's,
da 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 da
you
dum,
know,
da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. Yeah,
yeah,
it feels like it moves on, and in
yeah,
fact, Bronson even says the present variant, that melody, is more worn down than usual, having only two phrases repeated. And it does. Even Bronson noted that it was just two phrases repeated,
yeah.
and
So
therefore probably it sounds like there should be a B part, a second part to that goes higher and then returns to that initial phrase again at the
yeah, it
end.
does to me. But what do
No,
I know?
you
And
are. That's you are not without reasons there. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah.
but imagine 22 verses of that simple tune. Some
Oh
people would
yes.
love it. Some people would tear their hair out.
This is a
It's
conversation I had with John Bowden when he came on to chat on the singer half of the Child Morris episode, the Gil Morris one. He put a tune to the version he sings, which is a traditional tune that people play for dancing, the Dark Girl Dressed in Blue, which actually comes from a possibly an Irish music hall song. John did some digging into that, but that's got an A and a B part, and John, effectively made two verses, one verse by having an A and a B tune,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
does certainly with these much longer ballads, as John pointed out, it does give it a bit of musical color and variety.
yes,
And makes it a bit more listenable and a bit more palatable to the listener's ear. So it's all that
yeah.
sort of
I
thing. So
agree.
you're
Yes,
quite right in that, yeah, that is just one phrase repeated and feels a bit like it's a bit incomplete. Feels like it should move on a bit,
yeah,
but that's all that Bronson has.
yeah.
And
So that's pretty much all I can say about Jellon
that's fine. We'll
and Lily.
discuss it more with Nick Caffrey later on. It's lovely to see you again and have you back on the main podcast for this one. This is your last episode of this season. I think, looking by the spreadsheet, my lovely colour-coded spreadsheet, it's the only way to make sense of this mad project. I think we've got you once more for this year, and it's coming up in the next season. So, round about the second week of August, we will hear you discussing a Christmas song, and we'll leave it there for audiences to figure out what it is. So in the middle of
Okay.
August, we're going to have a brief Christmassy episode.
Well, I can guess which one it is, but I
Yes,
know
for
the
some
numbers.
reason, for
Yes.
whatever reason happened at the time when you were numbering things, in 61 to 70, it's all child ballads going on the current trajectory as it's been so far, except 68, where you suddenly did a Christmas song. So we'll come to that in early August. But otherwise, until then, Steve Roud, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Bye.
A huge thanks again to Steve Roud for providing us with the history of Jellon Grame. Just one traditional clip this time, as Steve mentioned. All we have is this one. And Nick Caffrey was our guest in the second half, was very kind enough to provide me with the recording. So what you're going to hear now is the wax cylinder recording of Alexander Robb from the James Madison Carpenter collection. So I won't play this quite as loud as other recordings because it's not very good, as you might expect. It's a wax cylinder, so it's pretty hard to listen to. But it is the only recording of Jellon Grame that exists. So have at it. Here you go. And there we go. That is the only field recording of a traditional singer actually singing Jellon Grame, Alexander Robb from Red Deer in Aberdeen. So I think it's wonderful that the powers that be have managed to digitise all those wax cylinder recordings from the James Madison Carpenter collection. I just think that's absolutely splendid. What a treasure trove of stuff that is there. I just want to take a couple of minutes now to tell you about our Patreon. Patreon is a way for you, the listener, to help support the podcast. Obviously, if you are listening to the podcast, you are therefore supporting it, and I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who's listening for keeping up the support. It's just fantastic, and it wouldn't be the same without you. But if you feel moved to donate a few coppers or digital versions of folding money, then Patreon is the place for you. For a monthly subscription, we provide a myriad of bonus content, bonus episodes, that is. And primarily, that takes in the form of episodes on songs from a lot further on in the Roud Index. As I've said before, if I do the podcast at the same speed I'm going at the moment, without taking a break, I'll, in about 40 years' time, when I am 74 years old, I'll be 76, but 74 from the time we started the podcast. Oh dear. I will only reach Roud 1200 out of what is currently about 48,000. Almost. We're almost at 48,000. So, yeah, the Patreon is a good place to cover more songs, and whilst the main podcast takes its song order from the Roud Index, on the Patreon we go by songs chosen by the singers themselves. It's effectively applying a random number generator to the Roud Index. And so, by way of an example, our very first Singer's Choice mini-season was 3 songs chosen by Nancy Kerr. Those songs were Roud 3378, a song called The Wee Weaver. Fantastic Irish song, that one. Roud 3065, that's a Northumbrian song called Elsie Marley. And a much lower one, but we'll come to it in about 3 or 4 years. Roud 165, Adieu Sweet Lovely Nancy. So it's all that sort of thing. If you want to hear histories and singers' thoughts on other songs, not just what we're covering on the podcast. We also do episodes looking at other aspects of folk song and folk song collecting in the form of what I call spotlight episodes. And so, for example, Nora Rhodes, who was our history and singer guest for the episode on Lady Margaret, which I think was Roud 37, so back in season 4, Nora came on the Patreon to do a singer spotlight episode where we took a look at the life of the American traditional singer Emma Dusenberry. And more recently, Andy Turner, who was our singer guest on the episode on the Cruel Ship's Carpenter, Roud 15, so season 2. Andy came on and did a region spotlight episode looking at song collecting in the county of Kent. And our next Patreon episode, which comes out tomorrow, if you're listening on the day this releases, that's Thursday the 16th of April, we have our next collector spotlight episode. We have Barbara Snape, who was our singer guest on Roud 36, Captain Wedderburn's Courtship. She works in a duo with her husband Peter, and the two of them do a lot of research into the life and work of the song collector Anne Geddes Gilchrist, to such an extent that Peter has actually just written and released a book on Anne Gilchrist as well. And so, yeah, this next Patreon episode is a collector spotlight with Peter and Barbara Snape looking at the life and song collecting of Anne Geddes Gilchrist. So if you feel so moved to support the podcast financially, you get all of that sort of thing. Please do head on over to patreon.com/intheroud. That's patreon.com/intheroud, and sign up for either £5 or £10 per month, and you can receive regular bonus content. And so we move on to the second half of this episode. I was really struggling, actually, to find someone who actually does sing this song, and also who could actually come on the podcast. But I was eventually put in touch with someone, and they very kindly agreed to come on and chat about the song. It turns out he does a folk song podcast too. Hurrah for folk song podcasts and to ramble in the new mown hay. I'll put a link to his podcast in the show notes. I'm just glazing over that really rubbish folk song joke reference I just did. But I'll put the link to his podcast in the show notes. And for my interview now, I was joined by the host of that podcast, so please enjoy my interview with Nick Caffrey. Well, hello and a big welcome to In the Roud, Nick Caffrey. Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you and nice to hear you.
Hi, thank you. Yes, it's nice to hear you. Technology problems. You can see me on Zoom, but I can't see you. But we'll manage, I'm sure. Great to have you here. This is our first time meeting. In fact, it's not often. I know a lot of people, but I did expect to have to come up to some people who I'd not met before on this as this podcast goes on, just because of who sings the songs. And this is a song that not many people sing. And so your name came up from a few people saying he sings Jellon Grame, which is right because I was struggling a bit to find. I didn't know who sang this one, so I'm glad you sing it.
I'm so much. It's a great song.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It's again, it's sort of I didn't know who sang it, and also you know, I've not managed to as yet go through the entirety of the Child collection, and it was just not a song that I was familiar with at all. I didn't even recognize the name. So this whole episode I'm making now is it's all completely new to me, which is fantastic. I like learning new stuff. Before we get on to the song itself, this is your first time on In the Roud, so give us and the listeners a bit of Nick Caffrey history. Your sort of how did you come to folk music, or did folk music find you? Was it thrust upon you, and all that sort of thing?
Well, when I was in the early days, in the 1950s, yes, I'm talking that far back, when I was in junior school, folk songs and folk dancing was encouraged, perhaps post World War II enthusiasm of the teachers. So we did things like The Mermaid and the Ash Grove and songs like that. I was familiar with them. But when it got to the 1960s, music was going through a big change. We got rock and roll, blues, plenty of it going. I had an older brother who's 5 years older than me, so I was into the rock and roll change well before somebody who probably pre-teen would normally get. And when we got to the 1960s, of course, we got Beatlemania. And what happened with that? I saw the Beatles in 1963, actually, and that's when it really took off. And in our school, there were about 5 bands all wanting to be rock and rollers. They were either Rolling Stones or they were Beatles or the Animals. And me and my friends said, "Oh, you're going to have a go because we sing and do a bit." And what we liked at that time was folk music. We just got into Bob Dylan. We'd seen the Spinners because they used to do a program on the BBC called Dance and Skylark with Stan Hugel, and it was on a pretend ship. They sang shanties. That sort of thing influences you before you start. So we began to put together songs that we thought might work as folk songs, as we recognised it at that time. I think the first one we did was Pete Seeger's "Where Have All the Flowers Gone," which we took off a single by the Kingston Trio. So you can see how far back that goes. But once we got a band together of the sort, we started playing schools, youth clubs, working men's clubs eventually as we got older. And then we had a mixture of songs influenced by the Dubliners, Spinners, Martin Carthy, because Martin was singing on a television program at that time called Hallelujah, which was on ITV, and Sidney
Right.
Carter introduced. And so we always taped it, so we nicked some songs off of that, and they had good guests on, so we pinched some of those songs, which is the way everybody does it, isn't it, really, in the beginning.
Yeah.
Those bands, that band went through a few changes, as you would expect. We heard the Watersons, so we started singing harmony stuff and the Young Tradition, so it got more complex. And then my friend who was in it, Neil Jordan, he played the guitar. In the early 70s, he went off to South Africa, and he went across land because he just split up from his girlfriend and he was fed up. So that left me on my own to some extent. And I started helping to run a folk club in Blackburn, where I live, just opposite the Ewood Park of the Furnhurst Hotel. And we ran it as a folk blues club. And I did it for about 2 years. So we had great singers on, like Joanne Kelly. We had all sorts of people coming on. One day we booked the Dransfields. This was getting on a bit. They didn't turn up. They rang at the last minute saying they couldn't get there. So I rang a friend of mine an Irish friend of mine who ran clubs over in Accrington. He says, "Oh, I've got a fella staying with us. You might like to hear him." And this Scots guy turned up, and it was Dick Gaughan. First time I ever heard him. Brilliant. And he was still into his very traditional style then. Anyway, after a couple of years, somebody rang me up while I was at work, and it was a girl I used to go to school with. And she said, "Are you still singing folk music?" I said, "Well, I don't know so much now." So she said, "Well, my husband's been in a group and it's just split up and he wants to do some traditional stuff. You fancy giving it a go?" So I said, "Yeah, where do you live?" And she lived not that far away from me. So I had to walk down and got singing. And the guy was called Ed McGurk, which is who I now sing with. And we sort of sized each other up like you do, sang a few songs, and eventually we set off as a duo. Now, they'd been running the folk club at Clitheroe, at the Dog and Partridge, and they carried on the group itself. So they decided to share it amongst everybody in the group as residents. So we became residents at Clitheroe Folk Club. And it's always handy as residency because it makes you learn a lot of songs. So everyday songs and new ones. And after a while, a chap who lived in Clitheroe joined us, Bernard Blackwell, and Bernie stayed with us for about 18 months, then went off to Loughborough University to study engineering. And Bernie then, when he was down there, started folk clubs up with a young woman who became his wife, Jill, and they made an LP for Fellside Records eventually, which was good. After Bernie left, we joined up with two guys who instrumentalists, a fiddle player and a guitarist. So we were a four-piece band then, doing sort of what was folk rock at that time. And that eventually fell out as it does. Personally, I got involved in tradition anyway, so it had brought me in. And when they split, me and Ed split, and I joined a group called the Wassailers, and they sang at a club, which was just around the corner from where I live. And a year later, we made an LP for Fellside Records, which was quite good. Couldn't believe it, really. And it was still, people still like it, so it's not so bad. I stayed with them for about 20 years. But during that time, I joined the Culture Society, the Irish Traditional Music Society, which a branch was run at Great Arwood, which is near Blackburn. And I became the vice chairman of it. So I was singing Irish traditional music as well as English traditional music. And I stayed with that for a few years, learned how to play the bodhrán quite reasonably. I've never been a good player. And then after that, I started going to folk clubs with a friend of mine who I met through one of my sons. He was working at a factory, and this chap come talking to him who was into folk music and said, "Oh, my dad's into that. You should meet him." And that's when I met a friend, Terry Martin, who I don't drive, so he used to pick me up and we'd go off to song sessions. One of the song sessions we went to was at Heapy, which is just outside Chorley. And that was run by a chap called Rob Mullaney. And that was quite a good session because there's quite some people who've become quite well known since then, including Jane Threlfall, who was part of the Threlfall sisters. And she was doing just learning, and she was very good even then. And out of that, we were asked by the pub manager if we would put on a performance for an old person's home at Christmas, go in and sing some Christmas songs. So 4 of us said we would do. And that was Rob Mullaney, George Critchley, myself, and Terry. We went off and had a bit of a practice, got it together, sang. We found that the sound was quite interesting. So we said, why don't we form a little group of some sort? You know, I know you're in the Wassailers, but work's not that plentiful these days. So we formed a group, and we were really casting around for a name, which is blooming nuisance trying to find a name that's interesting. Anyway, somebody said, why don't we call ourselves Antique Roadshow? Because we sing these old songs and what a bit of fun. So as a laugh, we did, and it stuck. And then, so I was working in 2 groups then, the Wassailers, Antiques Roadshow, and it took off from there. And I was Antiques for 20 years, playing all over the place in the Midlands and up in the north. And eventually we split up in the 2000s, mainly because I think we'd sung everything we could do that fit. And we had a final concert. We decided almost a year before we'd split on a certain day, we'd have a final concert. So we had a final concert in Chorley at a working men's club. And we booked the club for the whole day. And in the afternoon, we had a music session where 100 people turned up. And a lot of them, quite a lot of people who were well known from around that area. And at the evening, we put on a concert. And we decided with that concert, we would, the first half, we would sing with other people other than the group. So I contacted Ed McGurk again. I said, do you fancy doing it? He said, yeah, it'd be a good laugh. So we sang 3 songs. And as we came off, somebody booked us. So we said, yeah, all right, we'll do it. And we were stuck, we were committed then. And so since then, I've been singing with Ed. Part of the time as a duo, and then more recently we had a concertina singer, Robin Madge, join us, who stayed with us, and we made a CD. And then last year Robin decided he'd had enough and wanted to leave, so we've now got a new group with a fiddle player, a lady fiddle player, and Dave Howard, who plays in the Oldham Tinkers as well, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. So just about put that together now, and we're starting doing bookings with it. So, and we call that Litany, which is what we called the original band back in the 1970s. Now, in that period, I got very interested in the tradition and singing ballads. I think the ballad influence mainly came initially from Joan Baez. Back in the 60s, she was the sort of the American singer that everybody liked, along with Bob Dylan. And she used to do ballads very well, but very American, almost Spanish-American in the way she sang. But we used to sing those. A lot of people who sang songs like Mary Hamilton and those sort of things. The trees there do grow high and all that. But I got more and more interested in it, probably because I found the songs interesting. And when you mention ballad, people used to go, oh, hundreds of verses.
Yeah,
and I thought,
I know
that's
that.
the point. What's wrong with them? And what I did, I started to listen to what people were doing and realised they were singing them very badly. Ian McCall, he's a fine singer, but when he was doing the Scottish ballads, he would put this fake Scottish voice on, and he comes from Salford in Lancashire, so and it used to sound terrible. Not because he was a terrible singer, but you didn't get the body of what the song was about. So very well sing it in it full Scottish or full Irish, but if nobody can understand the damn thing, you're wasting your breath. When I started looking at the words of the songs and thinking, there's a heck of a good story here, and it just needs a bit of polishing up and editing in some places, because sometimes they were longer than they needed to be as a singer. So that's how I started singing the ballads. And I got the Child collection, of course, which was interesting. It was helpful for the different versions of the song. I know that Child was only the editor. He didn't actually collect them. He had a team who went out and collected them and searched out rare editions of it, manuscripts that had never been printed, original versions, like the Percy Relics collection. He actually managed to get that, and they bought it. And Harvard has that. And it helps because you see what was originally written, not what had been re-edited by different editors printed in the books.
Absolutely.
And the earlier could get.
That turns up quite a lot on the podcast, that whole thing about it's one of Steve Roud's things. He said to me when I first started this and looking at a version of a song, finding it's in Child, and then looking at where Child got it from. Steve Roud, his advice to me was never trust anyone. Just always go back to where they got it from and see what happened to it originally, or as far back original as you can go.
Yeah, I had a short lesson on that about songs when I was in the Wassailers. We used to sing a song, can't remember which one it was now, a soldier song anyway. And I said it was Napoleonic, and we sang the song and everything went well. But end of the night, a chap came up to me and said, that Napoleonic song you sung, it's actually from earlier years. It was much earlier, 100 years earlier. and he told me all the history of it. And I thought, I looked it up, and he was right. I thought, well, the best thing to do is always look for yourself. Otherwise, people misquote. I have another friend who's a big Richard Burton fan, the explorer, and he also said, one of the problems you have with this is that people quote things at you from newspapers, and because it's there, you believe it because it's written down. And he did a research. He went back to the original letters and articles that were in the newspapers and found that some of the quotes were not correct. So what he did, he brought a booklet out with all the original printings in, so people could quote it right. And I always think, well, it might be being a bit of a nerd, but if you go back to the beginning, two things happen then. First, you get what was actually written, and secondly, if you start singing it, you're singing your version of it, and haven't got bits of other people in your style. So if I heard Martin Carthy sing it, if I sang it like Martin, bits of his style creep into what you sing because of the way he expresses things. Whereas if you go back to the original tune, it becomes yours. And if it becomes yours, you can do with it what you want.
Sure, yeah.
So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, we had that a couple of seasons ago. Was it 3 seasons ago? Might have been. I get lost now. How many we've done so far? With the episode on the child ballad Sir Lionel, which a lot of people know as the song Bold Sir Rylus now.
Oh yeah, another one.
Which our singer guest for that one's a guy called John Wilkes. Lives down in near Winchester, but he's from Birmingham, and he's very keen on Birmingham sort of Midlands versions of things and Birmingham versions of songs or songs specifically to there. But he sings a version of that, which is the Jovial Hunter of Bromsgrove, and we were talking about that, and he said he got it from a book that was edited by Roy Palmer, and he got the book off his shelf and he looked at it, and he found that he'd accidentally got rid of a verse from one of them's in Roy Palmer's book, and that's a level of censorship in a way, editing rather than censorship. But then the version in Roy Palmer's book was out of Child, so I got my copy of Child off the shelf, and we went through and compared what the version C, I think it was, in Child was to the Roy Palmer edited book version, to find that Roy Palmer had got rid of 3 verses from the Child version. And so, even between Child and John, there were 4 verses that had gone, And so, it's always go back further and have a look at what there was, because there's always an extra level of editing going on that even if you might not realize. So, it's always worth having a look.
It is. The other thing to do is when you get to the version you want to sing, don't add stuff back just because you know it's there. Because if it slows up the storyline or is irrelevant to the song, you get a lot of repeated. There's a reason why you get repeated actions. Sometimes you don't need to do it, but other times it's important. Depends on the song really and where it's going to.
That's right. Sometimes the repeated bits are there purely because, especially if it was originally printed on a broadsheet or something, it's there because it had to fill a page. It had to fill the side it had to fit the side of an A3 page or something.
Yeah, so some of the repeated ones is really a reinforcement of ideas as well. Sometimes if they're going on a journey, they repeat the journey, but it changes. So what it's doing is reinforcing an action. That's right. I think, But anyway, that's like what I said. I learned those lessons early on that if you're going to do something and quote something, make sure you're right.
Absolutely, yes.
It's amazing how many people aren't.
Make
they
sure
quote
you're
out the back of an LP, which I used to do. But always look at the LP. It's always worthwhile. There might be something there you don't know.
Indeed.
But so I effectively, as well as singing in groups, I effectively built a sort of reputation, if that's the right word, for singing the ballads as well. Of recent years, I've not really done a lot with the ballads until COVID. In this 1990s, I wrote ongoing articles for The Living Tradition about traditional ballads. And I think I wrote I don't know, half a dozen. No, it must have been nearly 20, something like that. Come COVID, and you're crawling up the wall because I'd retired by that time, so I wasn't even going to work. My son said, "Why don't you do podcasts?" I said, "Well,
Yeah.
there's tons of them about." I said, "Well, you used to do that stuff in the living tradition. Why don't you just do the same thing, but instead of actually writing out the tunes, sing them?" So what you can do is then, if you're talking about uh, a certain ballad and there's different tunes to it, and you discover that there's an early tune that nobody sings, if it's any good, you might as well include it. So that's what I try to do. I include through the podcast. I usually try to include at least 3 or 4 verses from different tunes, and then end on a full version, either a popular one or one that I like singing. And it seems to work better that way. But the idea really is to get those tunes, hopefully, if people listen to them, back in. Think, oh, that's a good tune. And they look it up themselves and start working on it, and that tune and set of words get back into the system.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they only live when you sing. They only live when you sing them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Try and do that here a bit as well, because although not if there aren't any tunes to be found, sometimes there aren't. But if it's a child ballad, then there will be examples. More often than not, there will be examples of the tunes in the collection by Bronson, tunes for the child ballads. And so I do. I can't remember. I can't remember if I did any in this episode already because it's been a couple of weeks since I recorded that one. But if there were any tunes for Jellon Grame in Bronson, I would have sight sung them on the episode in the history half.
Well, they're just the one, isn't there?
Oh, that's right. There was one, wasn't there?
Yeah. That was collected by. Well, I think he put the Gavin Gregg version, but it was also collected by Carpenter as well, about 20 years later, from the same person.
That's right. That's the one that exists. It's the two different times Alexander Robb was visited by collectors. Yeah.
And the nice thing is with Carpenter, he actually recorded him. I mean, it's on cylinders, so it's a bit like that, but you can still hear him the way he sang it.
And so it's not quite a transcription, but yeah, James Madison Carpenter recorded him singing, Alexander Robb singing Jellon Grame. But years earlier, Gavin Gregg had collected the song and written down the melody. So theoretically, it's a transcription of the recording, except there's about however many years there are between the 1910 and 1930-ish. We've got about 20 years between the written down version of that tune and then a recording of the tune.
Yeah.
Which can be quite interesting to see because, things do change over time, and his Alexander Robb singing of the song probably changed a bit over the course of that time as well.
Yeah, the actual tune as noted is very similar. I think there's odd notes that have changed. That's all. But that's normal in singing anyway. If you learn a song now and listen to yourself sing it in 40 years' time, you'll find it's moved.
Absolutely. That will come to this next week, in fact, when we do Fair Mary of Wallington. There's only one time I think that's been found in the oral tradition, and we've got the transcription of that, which is because whoever collected it wrote the tune down when Bell Duncan was singing it. But what Vic Gammon didn't know, and what I didn't know at all, was until Vic Gammon did the research into the song, which we'll all hear about next week, was that there was actually the wax cylinder recording of Bell Duncan singing it. And so we've got the two to compare there. But again, like this one, that's all there is we can look into on the traditional oral tradition side of things. But yeah, so and the same with this one. It's just Alexander Robb. But so when did you first come across this song then?
Right, I came across it in the 1970s. I only heard it once, sung by Tony Rose. It was one of my singing heroes. Anyway.
Oh wow, okay. Because I wasn't aware of this. Oh, you mentioned this in an email to me, and I wasn't aware of it. And is that because I'm pretty sure he never recorded it?
No, I've never come across a record, which is a pity because I can't even remember what set of words he used. But I was in a club in Accrington. I used to go regularly to the folk clubs, of course, especially when somebody like Tony was on. And he sang this song, and I knew it was Jellon Grame. And I recognised the tune he used. It doesn't use this traditional tune because it's not unsingable. You can't do a lot with it. But he sang a version of a song that I was already singing for Willie of Winsbury. And it's also used, that tune, for False Foodridge as well, which Brian sang last week.
That's right, because it's technically, or no, not Brian sings. So this is where it all gets a bit muddled.
Yeah,
So
he sang it differently. He abandoned it to do
yeah,
it slightly differently.
yeah,
That's quite right.
because that melody that dun dun da 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 da, that melody is technically for False Foodridge because that's where it turns up in Bronson. But then Andy Irvin took it and used it for Willie Winsbury, and then but Brian didn't like it for False Foodridge, and Brian used one of the most common melodies found for Lord Gregory, the Lass of Rock Royal, which is Route
That's
49.
right.
We covered that in the previous season of this podcast. And so, yeah, we're starting to come across this now where, one melody can be used for two or three completely different songs because they all work in a way. And if you apply them to certain songs, it brings out different elements of sort of the narrative and the emotions and things. But from an analysis point of view, it can get quite muddled at times.
Well, the one for Willie Winsbury is actually a traditional link to it.
Okay.
Because I've done a podcast on Willie Winsbury, and that was one of the tunes. I can't remember who it was recorded off, but it's one of those ubiquitous tunes that turns up because it's got a lovely sweeping melody line, which helps with the drama of the songs. So you can have it singing something flat or something, very dramatic.
That's
which
right.
Does with Jellon Grame.
That's right. I've heard someone, Tom Spears in Shepherd, Spears and Watson, singing that same melody for their version of Earl Richard. And so it does
and it works, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then Willie of Winsbury is a song we will be coming to in the next season. This is the third to last episode of this current season. So we've got 2 more weeks after this. And then, so this season will end the end of April. And then once we come back for season 7 in the summer, around about end of June time, episode 4 will be Roud 64, Willie of Winsbury. So we'll be coming back to this melody again then. So it all interlinks.
Have a listen to my podcast on it and get some background information and the various tunes as well.
I will, yes.
But anyway,
I think
Tom Barber tunes.
That's all right. I think, Sheena Wellington's going to come back and do the history of that one for us.
Well, she's a lovely singer.
Yeah, she's going to do the history side, and I have my feelers out for singers. But yeah, so that's coming up later this summer. But yeah, it is, as you said, it is a really good tune because it has that nice sweeping bit in the third line and it's a really quite a high range song as well. It's like an octave and a bit, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, you can do quite a lot with it. Yeah, when I heard Tony sing it, but unfortunately there's no recording of it. And it was about 6 months later, I was looking around for another ballad to sing, and I remembered him singing Jellon Grame and the tune he used. So I don't know which version he used, but I went back to the child ballads and I picked what is the original one, the Anna Gordon version, because it's the most simple narrative and most logical narrative as it goes through to the end. Unfortunately, some of the other versions of it started adding things in that got complicated, and it was obviously added in either by the singer or by the editor. In one of them, I think it's the Motherwell one, it's called Brown Robin. In another one, it becomes Robin Hood. The boy becomes named Robin Hood and grows so many years for every one that normal, which appears in other ballads, but it's clearly not part of the original Jellon Grame.
Right, yeah, because I mentioned Brown Robin briefly with Steve earlier, because in one of the versions of Child, there is a character called Brown Robin, and then it caught me off guard because next season again, when we come, because episode 4 of next season with Willie of Winsbury, but episode 2 of the next season is a child ballad called Brown Robin.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's, again, all sort of either interlinked or just there's too many coincidences with these names and things, and it's quite hard to keep track of them all sometimes.
Well, you wonder sometimes with the early editors that they had perhaps fractions of songs, say a couple of verses here and a couple of verses there, and I think they sometimes added songs, lines in from other ballads. So it would spread out a bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
and that make a full ballad. And I think there's something like that as well. But it's an interesting song as it goes in itself, and has an interesting story because it's ambiguous to why he kills her. And my feeling is, in one of the versions, she's having a child by his brother, not in not in the Anna Gordon version. Somebody I was reading about it implied that Anna Gordon had written it, but I don't think that's quite correct. I don't know. That's just an opinion. I don't have no information one way or the other. I've only heard it said.
That's the it is a
But
it is a theory out there that because yeah, Anna Gordon was she was very literate
yeah,
and yeah, there was this will come up next week talking to Vic Gammon about Fair Mary of Wallington. There is someone who does reckon that that one could have been written by Anna Gordon because it turns up because there's like two or three different Anna Gordon manuscripts from different periods of time, and
yeah,
the
there
Fair
are.
Mary of
Yeah,
Wallington one only turns up in one of the later ones and not one of the earlier ones, and so someone took that to mean she could have come up with it in in between the two, you know. But
well, I
these
don't
are
think that necessarily follows. Well,
no,
the
but these are all
Jellon,
theories, you know.
yeah, Jellon Graham's the later one. It's the C series. If you get the book, which is an excellent book that was done, um,
Yeah,
it's divided into ages times. A is the earliest, B the next section when it was collected, C, and so on. I don't think it necessarily. The thing is, the song sweeps very well, rather like a good traditional ballad, rather than you can you can often see where they've added things. It's Scott's worst one for that, for adding verses in. It stands out because of the language they use. It's not
yeah,
traditional language; it's poetic language, and that doesn't work with the ballad. Anyway, like I said, I had this tune. I went through the child ballad collection, and really the Anna Gordon one seemed to me the one that made most sense. I did have back four verses that I can't remember who it was from now. It was possibly from uh, uh, Buchan, I think, about the flower motifs,
oh yeah,
about the flowers growing on the grave. Now, it doesn't. That's not in every one, but as I was reconstructing the ballad, I thought that was a wonderful sort of thing to put in the motif because it explains why he tells in by doing it that way why he tells the boy that he killed her instead of just saying, "Oh, well, it's just a mound," or "Your mother never came back." But on the flowers, on the grave, there's a lily flower growing, and she's called Lily Flower. And it seemed
uh,
to my mind psychologically, when the boy mentions the lily flower, it sets it off in his head and he tells him the truth. And that's what creates the ending. Now, I don't
right.
know, that's not in the tradition, it's not in Anna Gordon's, but to me, it just felt within the traditional thinking. That's the right word to put it.
Sure, yeah, yeah. And yeah, so I remember reading about the version that Peggy Seeger sang on an album we'll recommend later, and that yeah, the names are different. It's a Brown Robin one, because she
Yeah.
sings an American version, which she said is startlingly like the Child A text, and she's comparing the versions in Child. The B
Yeah.
and C
Yeah.
texts are notably different in that the maid is slain by Hind Henry, who is a brother to Brown Robin, who is the father of the child. So it all gets a bit muddled again with who's the father, who's the brother, which one killed her, and that
Yeah,
sort of
well,
thing.
that was from Virginia, isn't it? From Arthur Davis's book, Most Traditional Ballads from Virginia, which was printed in the 1960s.
That's right.
Um,
That's yeah, because yeah, the ones because yeah, the text that Peggy Seeger sings was the North Carolina one,
yeah,
and then yes, there's the Virginia one as
and
well, isn't there? Which I
yeah,
need to get
yeah.
my hands on a
She
copy of
does a
that
good
book.
job of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what Peggy also remarked, Peggy Seeger remarked, was that it's a subject matter that's not often found in balladry. She said the simpler story remains a grand example of a genre not often found in balladry, that of a grown child killing its parent. And I just suddenly realised that yeah, you don't really get that at all.
No, not that's not common, is it? The other thing that's not common is the openings. Why he kills her? In some, it's because he's in love with. Um, they've both got a child together, which is the one in Anna Gordon.
Oh
And
yeah.
his father or her father won't like it. But I often wonder whether that's just a disguise for an incestual relationship.
Oh,
Because
so
I always
it's
think our father would
yeah.
kill me in the morn. It's there's no proof one way or the other, but it's just the way it works. And in others, it's his brother who's the child, and he's jealous of the brother because he's had the child. Um,
And I guess that
they all go by different
there is
ways.
precedent for that because of ballads like Lucy One and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so it's not outside the realms of possibility. I quite like that as an idea. Yeah.
It's only an idea. I don't think we've any backing on
No, but yeah,
it.
we're well within your rights to change it and do whatever you want with it and make it mean whatever you want it to mean. But if you so wish. But yeah, it's interesting that I just haven't heard this song much. But thankfully with the good man himself, Reinhard Zierk over at Mainly Norfolk, has come up with a decent amount of versions that have been sung that I wasn't aware of. So we'll come to them in a minute. But so the melody you use, I'm just getting my head around all this. The melody that you used is that same sweeping one that a lot of people use for William Winsbury, some people use for False Friedrich.
Yeah, Jellon Grame stood in the silver wood, and he sharpened his broadsword long, and he ascent his little footpage, and heaven for to run.
Very
That one.
nice. Yeah. That's as I said, a really, really good melody. That one.
I think the reason why it's not been sung previously is that because the tune that was associated with it clearly fits to is the tail end of another tune. It sounds that way when you sing it.
Yeah, I remember this now. This is the problem with doing multiple episodes of a podcast
I know.
multiple halves of a podcast is that when we came to start the recording of this interview, I've done about three or four other interviews since I did the one with Steve Rudd about Jellon Grame, so I'd completely forgotten that there was that single melody in Bronson for Jellon Grame, and you just reminded me that. And even Steve Roud, who isn't musical really in the slightest. I hope you won't mind me saying that. But even he recognised that it was clearly probably the first half of a four-line melody, and it needs an extra bit in it, to make it worth singing. And maybe that's why some people chose to ignore it.
Well, what you've got? Oh, Jellon Graham sat in the good green wood. He sharpened his broadsword long. He called on his young foot page, who quickly to him ran. Get up, my young foot page, as fast as e'er you can, or you must go to Lily Flower, where the sun beyond the rain. Well, if you're going down to about 18 verses, that could get very tiresome towards the end for a listener and a singer because
Absolutely.
it doesn't go anywhere. But it certainly sounds familiar to another song, like it's the tail end of another song, another tune.
Yeah, if I was to work on that for my own sort of not personal gain, personal singing gain, then I would make that a four-line tune, and so that would be the first two lines, and then I'd
Yeah,
have a third line, almost the third line of that William Winsbury tune, da 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 da, and then go back to that first line again, making it an AABA tune, which is what that William
yeah,
Winsbury tune does, obviously, but
yeah.
using this Jellon Graham one. It needs like a higher sweeping bit, which is basically what that other tune does.
Yeah, it brings out the drama of the story. Because in the end, when you're singing a ballad, you're telling a story, you're telling a narrative. You don't sing it, look, I know this long song. What you're doing is listen to this story. And this is how it goes, and you build it as you sing it, both speeding it up, slowing it down if you're unaccompanied, and putting emphasis on certain lines that mean something if you were telling a story. And so it pulls the audience in rather than makes you think, oh, when's it going to stop? I remember hearing some ballads, and they would get a third verse, and you think, oh grief, do they not know how this song goes and what it's about? Because really it's the content of the story that you're putting across. And that's what the ballads were. They weren't special. They were effectively a narrative that was bigger in the day because they didn't have any telly or radio or anything. So they tell this story. That's why sometimes you hear some of the singers, the traditional singers, who extend it. And they extend it because if they were stood at night, say, around a campfire singing it, and people were ready for it, it helps because it keeps the story together. We've got to think in those terms sometimes when we look at what's been collected from the tradition of that it was a different world than it is now, and the way in which people sang and listened to them is different from the way we listen to them.
Yeah.
So we, as the singer, has to sort of put it across as a great. You have to pull the people into it so that they don't feel like it's lasted 4 years. It's like, wow, that was quickly over with, and yet you've done 8-10 minutes worth of song, and that's the sort of aim, I think, for most singers who are doing ballads, to make it interesting, not rattle through it, but let it sweep along and have the sort of inferences within it, within the voice. I don't mean do it like caricature, like a musical, which is what I think in the old days, when the beginning of the folk song society, they always said everything had to be sung flat with no emotion whatsoever. But they were suffering from having a lot of the ballads being parodied in the music hall.
Right.
And
Yeah.
some of them are very easy to parody. And so the singer in the musicals exaggerate certain parts of it and make it sound silly. Whereas I think that what they were doing, saying, stop all that, bring it back to the original. This is how we hear it, the traditional singers sing it. But we've also got to remember that sometimes when they were collecting off traditional singers at that time, they might not have sung the song for a few years because nobody's ever asked them. Some of the great songs have been collected in workhouses and occasionally in a gypsy camp, often with Cecil Sharp, somebody who lived down the road, if he got visiting his friend at Ambridge. Oh, Nellie sings that. Go to Nellie and have a listen. But she might not have sung it for a while. So she's nervous. She's got this posh stranger from London come up. She's trying to get it across. So that's why sometimes the songs, as they're written and played from the notation, they're quite fast. I think sometimes it's the nervousness of the singer in there as well. And the way they sing it isn't quite the same as they would say if they're in the pub. And there was everybody was having a bit of a sing.
Yeah, there's all sorts of levels of things to consider when looking at this stuff. You get things like the Copper family. It's when they were collected, there was a story that inside the Copper family about I can't remember which generation referred to her as old Granny Copper. I think that means Copper's mum wouldn't let. One theory, even within the Copper family, that's why the songs, Copper family songs, there's nothing risque really or suggestive in it, is because old Granny Copper wouldn't let those verses be sung to the collectors.
Well, I think there's always been an element of that anyway.
Yeah.
That people are shy to sing the song because they thought it was rude. Bob was a wonderful talker.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've just done an episode on our Patreon, which will be coming out tomorrow, I think. Let me just look at my dual spreadsheets. Yes, there's an episode on Patreon going out tomorrow, which is on the song collecting work of Anne Geddes Gilchrist, and with my interview with my friend and yours, Peter and Barbara Snape, and which brought up a bit in conversation about, she was a woman going around collecting songs, and so, would the men not have wanted to sing certain songs in front of a lady, and all this, so there's that whole extra level of self-censorship, if you like, on the part of these traditional singers, which is
Yeah, Annie
it's
Gilchrist, she lived at Southport, or just outside of Southport.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I know that people in Bob are keen on her stuff. Alan Bell used to be a big fan of hers as well.
Oh yeah.
He was, because we often used to talk about the songs and things, because he was making a bit of a study of her as well. Very interesting lady. And of course, she finished up involved in the EFDSS itself.
That's right.
Um,
Listeners can hear
and
all
that is
about
some
that.
wonderful, great sort of narratives within the folk song journals.
Mm.
Looking, analysing some of the songs and where they come from.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And listeners, if you sign up to the Patreon, you can hear a whole episode on Anne Gilchrist that goes out tomorrow, but it'll always be up on Patreon. Or you can buy Peter Snape's new book, which is all about Anne Gilchrist as well. So nice plug for that as well.
One of my things I did in the past, I worked on the Lancashire radio with Nick Dow for about 7 years.
Oh yeah, we've had Nick Dow on the podcast.
Oh yeah, well he's good. He's a great singer, nice fellow as well.
Yeah.
And larger than life in sometimes. But we've been good friends for a long time. But during that time when I was working on Nick's program, we started going out doing some interviews. Myself and a lad called Les Bond. And one of the people we interviewed was the Copper family. We spent a full day with Bob at his house, just interviewing him and talking to him. We got a couple of programs out of that. If you let me have your address, I'll send you copies of the actual broadcast.
Oh sure, I will do. Yeah.
I mean, he's wonderful to listen to, a great storyteller. But when he left, when the family we got there the day before, and I went to the Central Club and had a few pints with him. And he said, "Oh, come round about 9 o'clock." When we came round, he said, "Family's not coming round till lunchtime." So I said, "Well, can you talk about song collecting?" Because I'd read his book about it, and so we did. He talked all about collecting the songs and how it set up and what he collected. And then when the family came round, we talked to him and the family about the family's history. And afterwards, when they'd gone, he said, "Oh, don't go whizzing off. Are you going anywhere?" I said, "No, I was just staying in a bed and breakfast down bottom." He said, "Stay." So we got some beers in and had a really enjoyable night, just talking about music and songs. And it was just smashing. We did one with Shirley Collins as well, similar, which was very interesting. But we broadcast one of them, which was about a life story, and we talked about Voice Across America, but for some reason she didn't want us to do that one because she was bringing the book out. She thought it might stop people buying it. Personally, I think people would have bought it if they'd listened to it because it's so interesting.
Sure.
But that's the way it goes, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. But yeah, well, it's lovely to hear that because I haven't met you before, so it's really fascinating to hear about all the work you've done like that as well. Just it's nice to hear what people are doing. Let's just wrap this episode up though with some recommended listening, as we always do. Modern stuff, as in not traditional recordings. There aren't many, but through the good work of, as I said earlier, with Reinhard over at Mainly Norfolk, I was looking this song up on Mainly Norfolk about a month ago as I was gearing up to sort of email people about this episode. And there was only a couple of versions, maybe 3 there. And then last week, I got an email from Reinhard saying, "I've just added more. You're coming up to this song, aren't you? I've just added more to it." So thankfully, we can point people towards some more versions, not just what I assumed was the only ones anyway. So who would you point people towards for this one?
Well, certainly Peggy Seeger. I think Peggy's a very underrated singer because when she was with you and she was sort of under a shadow, which was unfortunate because she's a good singer and has a strong knowledge of the American tradition.
She really does. We had Peggy on this podcast last season. I think it was the last season for a very unknown child ballad, Fair Janet. And,
I know that one. Yes.
Yeah,
that's going to be one of my podcasts in future.
Is it? Well, but yeah. So we had Peggy talking for almost an hour in the second half of that episode about she practically went went through the song verse by verse, talking about it all, which was absolutely fantastic. I was very honoured to get an interview with her for that. And so yeah, that her version of that is on uh, her and Ewan's album Blood and Roses Volume 3, which I'm
That's
gradually
right.
working my way through listening to them. They're
Oh,
fantastic
they're good,
albums.
all of them.
Yeah.
What about the Long Harvest? Have you got those?
No, not yet. I mean, basically, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and I've got lots to listen to. But I'm trying to work my way gradually through the Ewan MacColl and then the Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger sort of back catalogue. I know a lot of it is now available to stream and buy on Bandcamp, and
Well, that's good.
I've been gradually working my way through it. I've not got to the Long Harvest yet. I've been listening to. This is a side tangent. I've trying to my brain won't let me do things not in chronological order sometimes. So starting from the beginning of Ewan MacColl, of certainly what is available on the Bandcamp page, because that is run by the Ewan MacColl family, and so it's all official releases. And I've been listening to the 6 or is it 8 volume LP series of, or was it 4 volumes? Can't remember. Ewan MacColl and A.L. Lloyd's songs from the Child Ballads series, which ended with a 9th volume or a 5th volume, depending on which way you look at it, which was Great Ballads Not Included in the Child Collection.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm not quite there at Blood and Roses or The Long Harvest yet, but I'm getting there gradually as I listen to them.
I have to say that Bert was one of my heroes back in the 60s.
Oh yeah,
I know he didn't do everything, and he made things up, but he was such a larger than life character. I met him a couple of times.
nice. Yeah, well, he's very influential man and great singer. And if you want to hear more about the lid being blown off the A.L. Lloyd story, find Brian Peters has done all the extensive work on that, but he still likes him. It's just there's a lot of ideas to dispel, I think, sometimes with people. But
of course there is, yes. Yes, I think it was it was a bit of a romantic in some aspects. Andy, he did some good stuff. Like Macaulay did some great stuff. Got some songs singing, and they're still alive. But he was a larger than life character. I met him. We used to do residency at the Bury Traditional Club in Bury, the Bluebell before your time. And he used to have him on there at least once a year, and he used to stay with our fiddle player and his wife. So I got chatting to him quite a few times, and I found him fascinating and interesting. And he was easy to talk to. Ewan MacColl, you had to queue up in a line and shake his hand and be spoken to if you went to one of his concerts.
Right,
but that's just how it goes.
Yeah,
but,
indeed.
Anyway,
But yeah, so
anyway,
but the Peggy Seeger recording, I did listen to it this morning before we did this interview, and it was fantastic. I really liked it.
It's lovely.
And that's 1982. Blood and Roses Volume 3 came out in 1982, so that's a fair old recording. Who else though? There are a handful more, aren't there?
Paul Clayton did a version of it from Peter, Paul and Mary. Paul Clayton.
Oh, so I was looking this up, and I didn't know who Paul Clayton was, but it's Paul of Peter, Paul and Mary, right? I didn't realise that.
Correct, but this version's very odd, really, because it seems like he's sort of not really sure of the tune and making it up as he goes along. That's how it struck me. I might be very wrong, but that's it. But it's interesting to listen to. It's always interesting to hear people think stuff anyway, whether you like it or dislike it, because it always gives you a perspective of the way you do things. But Paul's well worth listening to, and it's certainly on YouTube. That's where I've heard it.
That's right. That's an album called Bloody Ballads. Depending on which release, because it originally came out in 1956. This is an LP on the Riverside label, 1956, and it was called Bloody Ballads, Classic Scottish and American Murder Ballads. But there was a Washington Records re-release of it in 1962, where it's just called British and American Murder Ballads. And that is 2 sides, 18 tracks of murder ballads, and towards the tail end of side A is Jellon Grame. Not an album I was aware of, but then I've put Peter, Paul and Mary. I mean, I know of them, but I've not really delved into them particularly, and then consequently, the solo career of Paul Clayton was not on my radar at all. But recordings of folk songs and old child ballads, I'll take a listen properly. But you're right, that track is on YouTube. I did check that out earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. It's just finding them, really.
I know it's quite tricky sometimes, isn't it?
Chap called Reynard the Fox, he calls himself. He does a lot of traditional recordings. He puts them on.
He does, doesn't he?
There's
I've
some
come
nice,
across him, yeah.
yeah. There's a few very good sources within that to find stuff we want to listen to. It's not all inclusive. It relies on people putting them on there, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah, absolutely. And then it's two or three more to talk about briefly. There's, I would never have found this, but Reinhard did. There's a Philadelphia band called Broadside Electric, and in 1999 they had an album called With Teeth, which is folk songs. There's the Royal Oak on there. That's Roud 951 with her head tucked underneath her arm. The Gardener. That's a child ballad we've covered on the Patreon. In Bruton Town, that's a child ballad we've covered already. But also is Jellon Grame in there. And I've not had a chance to listen to this, but they do say in the sleeve notes that closely related to False Food Rage, but the contents have been mingled and cross-polluted over the years. But they do admit that it's been heavily sort of doctored, their version. Said most of the words used here were extracted from Child, but a lot of the verses have been heavily rewritten or newly authored by two members of the band. So it's a bit of a mishmash of some old verses and some either rewritten or just brand new verses to sort of flesh out the story a bit. But I've not had a chance to delve into that one a bit, so I'd be interested to hear that one from Broadside Electric. And then I just want to finish off with there's two sort of interlinked ones in a way. There's a man who I've not really come across called Bob Coltman, an American guy.
No, I don't know him. No.
Yeah, in 1976 he made an album called Son of Child. I see. Thank you, Maney Norfolk, for putting details about the album as well as just the album. This is an album of updates to child ballads written by Bob Coltman. So he's taken child ballads, and I don't know how without listening to the album and making copious notes, I'm not entirely sure what kind of updates they are, whether they are like in terms of the time they're set in, or just updated with modern sort of perspectives. I don't know, but I'd have to investigate it. We've got so, like for example, track 1 on this album is called Devil in the Garden, but in brackets, this must be some notes in the LP sleeves, which Reinhard has had access to. Devil in the Garden, brackets, Riddles Wisely Expounded, child number 1, and The Elfin Knight, child number 2. So he's obviously taken those two child ballads and put them together, because there are riddles in both of them, clearly. And consequently, with track 3 is called Red Robber, which it says in brackets, Jellon Grame. And so, Bob Coltman's sleeve notes, he says, I don't think he says anything about updating it, but he says, Jellon Grame is kind of a monster of the greenwood, a bad Robin Hood, more like what a regulation outlaw should be. I've modelled this on Child's first version. In the other ones, May Marjorie or Mary O'Rowe has 2 lovers, which complicates the plot a great deal. In some of the versions, there is definitely witchery going on. The boy grows up with unnatural speed and learns much too readily for any ordinary sort of child, as if Mama has somehow passed on a curse. But the magic is too low-lying and old and cryptic to be seen clearly. And so I think he's just, I don't know, I don't, without, as I said, without listening to it myself, I don't know quite how strong the word update is used for the versions that Bob Coltman sang. But it's there anyway, worth checking out, because almost everything's worth checking out. But then years later, that was 1976, and in 2019, it turned up again. That same Red Robber, the Bob Coltman version, is on an album by the fantastic American singer and banjo player Sarah Gray.
Yes.
With her son Kieran Means, and they I haven't seen them in a while. I guess since COVID and the pandemic and everything, we've had a fewer American visitors to the English sort of traditional folk music scene. But Sarah Gray and Kieran would come over all the time and perform at festivals and folk clubs, Sarah Gray has been over in the last couple of years, I think, but she's getting on a bit in age and so doesn't travel quite as much, but she still does. But on the two of them, Sarah and her son Kieran made an album in 2019 on Wild Goose Records called Better Days Are Coming. And on there, I think that's the most recent album Sarah's made. And on there, second to last track is Red Robber, brackets Jellon Grame. And she's basically said, it's a rare ballad, fewer versions have been found. In this reworking of the ballad, Coltman gets rid of all the complicated versions with witchcraft, with sisters. So instead of witchcraft, with sisters of the dead woman educating the child. So I think he might have just. I think so. Maybe Bob Coltman just got rid of the supernatural bits.
Well, I think that happens in Hind Henry, the Motherwell one, where
Yeah.
the lady is called Marjorie who gets killed, and her sister brings the baby up, calls him Brown Robin after his father.
There we go. Yeah. So exactly. So yeah, there's all sorts of things going on there, and so yeah, Bob Coltman did it himself, and then Sarah Gray sang his version. But yeah, so it's not a song that hasn't been sung on the folk revival. There are some child ballads we've covered on the podcast that maybe have found in the child collections and a couple of other versions, but no one, it seems, on the folk revival has ever sung it, which makes it quite difficult to find singers for this podcast sometimes. But it's just interesting, and it's fun, I think, bringing these lesser known child ballads back to light, and I think Jellon Grame counts as a lesser known child ballad.
It's still a good one. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good song. It's a good song. It's a great song.
It really is, yeah.
It just needed a tune.
Yes, that's right. And I think, hopefully through this podcast, people might start singing some of these lesser-known songs a bit, if they're listening to these episodes, of course. If you are listening, hello, that's very nice of you. I appreciate your support. Otherwise, I think we'll leave things there. Thanks so much for coming on and doing this. This has been... it's very nice to meet you. I hope we get to meet in person at some point, but it's been lovely to chat about this song and about songs in general.
Good. Yeah, no, what? Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Brian, for suggesting me as well.
Yes, that's yes, because I didn't know you at all. My apologies. I don't think I'd even heard of you, but that's the way sometimes in the scene. You can't know everyone, even if you think you might be able to, But I know that. So I know that. Because this episode goes out on the 15th of April. So Litany, your band, do have... I always forget to do this, and my apologies to most of my previous guests. I'm very bad at remembering to ask our guests to plug what work they've got coming up. And Litany have some gigs coming up, don't they? Including one near me in Sheffield, but you must have other gigs as well.
Yes, at Kiverton Park next month. We're singing in Lee and Fleetwood next month. In June, we were at the Bridge up at Newcastle.
Oh, lovely.
And after that, my memory fades.
That's okay. That's good enough.
Keep me head that long.
And where can people find your podcast as well?
It's you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, and it's called Nick Caffrey, A Singer's View. And it's called that because I approach it from the way singers need to. If you're a singer, this is the stuff you might need to know. Here's examples of the different tunes, and this is the background to the song, if you need it. I don't just do ballads, I do other songs as well.
Sure.
And then I've done 70 of them, yes, don't faint. But they're not long. They generally last about 20 minutes at the most.
Well, there we go, yeah.
I include a full version of the ballad within that at the end, after talking about and singing different samples of the tunes and explaining where it comes from and related songs. It finally gets to a full performance of it.
Nice.
And you can find that on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and click subscribe, it'll bring all the list up of songs. I know some of parallel ones you've already done, because I've been doing it for a few years myself. So
sure.
I've got 5 waiting to do, but I haven't had time to do them yet.
That's fair enough. Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the episode notes for this, so people can be directed to yours. Podcast, folk podcasters of the world unite. And but otherwise, we'll leave things there. And until we meet again, Nick Caffrey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jellon Grame stood in the silver wood, and he sharpened his broadsword long, and he has sent his little foot page an errand far to run. Rise up, fair lily flower, red sun is on the rain, and you are bid to the silver wood. I fear you won't return. She mounted on her bonny grey, and fast away rode she, till she has come to a new dug grave beneath a green oak tree. And out in there sprang young Jellon Grame from a bush thereby. Step down, fair lily flower, shortly you will die. She stepped down from the bonny grey, and she fell down on her knees, saying, spare my life, Jellon Grame, I'm ill prepared to die. Your baby moves between my sides, and must shortly see the light, and to see it weltering in my blood would be a dreadful sight. If I spared your life, fair lily flower, until the babe was born, our Father he would take me out and hang me in the morn. He's drawn out his long broadsword that was lying by his knee, and through that lady's heart the cold steel it did go, and there's no remorse for that lady, though she was lying dead. But he espied that little babe weltering in her blood. He picked up that little boy and held him tenderly. He says, you are my own dear son, though your mother did ill use me. He's brought up that bonny boy, called him his sister's son. He thought no man would e'er find out the deed that he had done. Now it fell out all on a day, as hunting they did ride, they rested in the silver wood, down by the greenwood side. And many were the summer flowers that on the grave that grew, and marvelled much this bonny boy at their many-coloured hue. What's paler than the primrose flower? What's redder than the rose? What's fairer than the lily flower that on yon grave that grows? Then up spoke young Jellon Grame, aye, and he spoke hastily. Your mother was the fairest flower and she lies beneath yon tree. More pale was she, as she begged her life, than the primrose pale and wan, and red, oh red, was her heart's blood, that down my broadsword swam. If this be true, then Jellon Grame, and I think you tell no lie, there is no deed ever done the quicker shall be paid. He's drawn out a long arrow, it was both keen and sharp. He let it fly at Jellon Grame, and pierced him through the heart. Lie there, you Jellon Grame, for this I say to thee, the place wherein my mother lies, it is too good for thee.
That was Nick Caffrey singing Jellon Grame. And that brings us to the end of this episode. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this song? I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to drop me an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk. I do try and reply to them all. I do apologise if you're still waiting for a reply. I will get there eventually. Or you can visit the podcast on any of our various social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/intheroudpod. Our handle on Instagram and Threads is at intheroudpod. And our Blue Sky handle is at intheroud.bsky.social. If you are enjoying the podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review on wherever you get your podcasts from wherever you get your podcasts. It just really helps the podcast to spread its wings, reach a wide audience, and ride that lovely algorithm wave. Thank you. In the Roud is also a media partner to Veteran, the traditional music label. Although this week's song does not currently feature on any of their releases, you can find details of their extensive catalogue on their website, veteran.co.uk. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Steve Roud and Nick Caffrey. Join me next week for episode 9 of this season. We will be looking at Roud 59, which is child ballad number 91, a song called Fair Mary of Wallington. My history guest will be Vic Gammon, and my singer guest will be Frankie Archer. Until then, that's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.